do, da, 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 da.
Welcome back to Sci-Fi and Fantasy Read Along. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing great.
Long time no see.
Long time no see.
It's been 2 minutes, and that seemed like way too long.
We just had to get back. We just had to get right back to this.
Yep,
I'm
exactly,
excited
exactly.
because there's so much I want to say for the end of this book that I'm like overflowing with enthusiasm.
Excellent. Well, here's hoping that we have a really good conversation. We're going to begin by talking about Chapter 10, which is just a few pages long, and then we're going to have a general conversation about the book afterwards. It might be worth asking if anybody has anything to say before we get started, or can we jump in?
No, let's just jump in.
Jump.
This chapter, very much like the first chapter, is a direct communication between the narrator and the reader. We begin with information about Robert Kennedy being assassinated recently at the time of the writing of this book. It was preceded a month before that with Martin Luther King being assassinated. And now the narrator mentions that his father had died of natural causes. He was a lovely man. He was also a gun nut.
True, but I'm going to start hedging into my synopsis during this chapter, if you don't mind.
I don't know what that means, man. And I'm willing to bet that you don't either.
He's sidling right now. So you've got something about something he wants to talk about later. He's laying down the grounds, the foundation of what he's going to like BS us with later.
I don't usually expect you to be the one to explain other people, but thank you.
You're welcome. So sidle away, buddy.
Thank you very much. This novel has often been portrayed as an anti-war novel, and I think it says it so clearly in the very first section of Chapter 10, where he says, "And every day my government gives me a count of corpses created by military science in Vietnam." So it goes. You know, and there's been touches on it throughout this chapter, but it's...
You mean book?
Yeah, throughout the entire book. That's right. It's really starting to hit home. And he opens it up because Chapter 10 is his summary of his book. And I think he's trying to wrap all of his messages, all of his ideas, and summarize them in this chapter. Kind of like Rumford when he was trying to create his 27-volume historical history of the Air Force in World War II, and then creating this summary book.
Just so he could include Dresden.
And that's kind of how I feel Chapter 10 is.
Okay, that's fair.
So all the other stuff was windbaggery, and this is the crux.
All right, let's talk about the chapter. All right, so the Tralfamadorians, we're told, love Darwin. They think that he is the best human because corpses make better people.
That's what he taught us, is that corpses are improvements.
It's an iteration. A human is an iteration.
He said it in such a callous way.
Yeah, but I mean, it's very true, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Actually, that's what natural selection is.
So there's even the Darwin Awards, which is like really stupid ways people die.
That's just comedy. That's for
comedy.
People who die before having children.
Well, I mean, we're talking about survival of the fittest, right? And if you can't cross the street properly, you might not be fit. And it'd be like if we get in a situation where all of Earth is flooded, we're going to have flipper humans again.
No, they're all going to drown.
Actual Darwinism, you has 1 million individuals, or 10 million, or 10 billion, and 5% of them survive a traumatic event. And that 5% who survive...
I saw something interesting on this, actually. It was about the Black Plague. There's a genetic mutation that helped people during the European Black Plague survive. But there's this town up in England where 14% of the population has this to this day. They still have this genetic mutation. It's not an important change that was made, except that those that had it, the particular bacteria could not find its way inside of the lymphocytes of these people. That's what it did.
They all had forked tongues. That's the weird thing.
There's something else that the narrator says here. He says that he hopes that Billy Pilgrim's view of the Tralfamadorian way of thinking about humans being alive forever, he says he hopes that that is not true, and that even if it is true, at least some of the moments were nice. So it doesn't sound like the narrator thinks that all life was peachy keen. He doesn't want to live forever. He doesn't want to relive some of the stuff that he experienced. Some of it was terrible, and he doesn't want it to go on forever. Like, that would be torture.
Do you think he remembers the day he was crapping his brains out?
I suspect he does. He put it in the book.
When he reflects on that, is that a moment that's good?
Real? I don't know. It was obviously funny, and it's funny to us. So, like, his misery... David Sedaris is pretty good at doing this as well, where you take some pretty harsh stuff from your youth or your childhood or whatever, adolescence, doesn't matter, and you make it a little bit funny, and you deliver it to other people in a way that they enjoy it. You get to share it with them. You get to get it off of your chest. But the experience was still horrible. It wasn't funny.
Yeah, but people identify with the suck and the pain you endured because they get it.
One of the nice moments from his perspective, the narrator's perspective, was the trip that he and his friend O'Hare took back to Dresden, which, again, they talked about it at the beginning in chapter 1. And now we're on the plane going to Dresden, flying over Germany and etc. And we get a lot of statistics, which I think is why you were talking about this, Yule. O'Hare has an almanac or something like that. It's full of statistics, got population of this place, that place, and the other place.
The one statistic that I thought was interesting that I wanted to look up was it said by 2000 there'd be 7 million people.
Billion.
That's 7 billion. 7 billion. And it was just under 6.2.
I did that too, 6.1, yeah.
Because everything else was like, hey, there's 324,000 babies born a year. And then there's this many deaths, and then all this other statistics that were like, okay, this is very much of the time. It's very easy to handle. Again, when you think of the atom bomb blowing up.
Why are you laughing?
Because it's crazy to imagine the devastation that would occur. And then you find out that the number wasn't even 100,000.
Yeah, kind of mind-blowing.
That doesn't seem as serious all of a sudden. I don't know, it's just a number.
Dude. Have you ever seen $10,000?
Dude.
Can you imagine what the number 10,000 means?
Yes.
I can't.
100,000? Yes, I can. 1 million. Woof. That's
certain
tough.
Stadiums can contain 100 or perhaps 20,000 people. I don't know. What's the biggest football stadium can you think of?
I think they do like 100,000, like those Oklahomas or something like that.
It's pushing 100K.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, that's a lot of people. Don't get me wrong. 100,000 is a lot of people. We had over 600,000 people die of COVID last year.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people.
Still going.
It's still going. I mean,
that's just us, too.
That's just us, yeah. I mean, that's just Americans.
Yeah.
So when you tell me that a nuclear bomb, and I'm thinking like this is, when I was growing up, this is like the end-all, be-all.
Yeah, for sure.
The most scary thing ever is a nuclear explosion.
Yeah, well, it isn't anymore.
No, it's not even close.
It would be...
why am I laughing? Because we're talking about people dying, that's why.
Yeah, so it goes.
Yeah, well, see, so it goes when I wouldn't have an uncomfortable laughter attached to it, I don't think.
Yeah, probably not, because you wouldn't react at all, right?
Right.
So it goes just means why get worked up?
I would like to say that Texas A&M has the 4th largest stadium with 102,000 possible.
So next Saturday,
why
don't you look at Texas A&M when they're at home?
Michigan's the highest with 107.6K.
Oh yeah,
that's incredible.
That
College.
Michigan, man, they go out and they fill that.
Amazing.
All those type of schools do. It's amazing.
Well, we get all those statistics, and they're interesting. The one particularly that I was shocked by was the amount of people that starved to death at that time every year. I don't know. I imagine that number's going up or down, whatever. But as they're traveling to Dresden, it's the narrator. He is imagining dropping bombs as they go. And he seems kind of callous when he's talking to O'Hare about it, about people dying and stuff like that, which I think is a symptom of the fact that they lived through the war together. But at the same time that they're traveling to Dresden, so too is Billy Pilgrim. But he's traveling there in 1945. And in Dresden, I think they kind of merge. Because he says that Billy Pilgrim is there, he is there, O'Hare is there. And then he begins to tell us the story of the corpse mines.
I don't know, the narrator, he's confused himself with Billy Pilgrim, and we've done that before anyway.
we wondered about him, and now I'm wondering if it's not just an amalgamation of people that he knew, people that he met. Parts are him, parts are O'Hare, parts are other people that he... Yeah, that's kind of what I figured.
So, like, the narrator, I don't feel is Vonnegut. That's the most important thing.
No, but he's probably closer to Vonnegut than the narrator is to Billy Pilgrim.
Except for at the very end.
Well, let's get to the
Maybe they
end
all
and then
very
we
are. I mean, I guess. I mean, what we're saying... Anyway, please, go ahead.
Corpse Mines.
Oh, this guy's just the worst part.
I was astounded by the Maori dying from dry heaving.
That's crazy stuff.
Do you guys remember the greatest natural disaster in terms of loss of lives in the history of the United States?
No.
It was a hurricane on the coast of Texas, Galveston.
What year?
It was before the National Weather Service. And in fact, the National Weather Service became a thing because of this.
Galveston hurricane, early 20th century, 1900, September 8th. 6,000 to 12,000 people died on Galveston Island and the mainland. Texas's most advanced city was nearly destroyed.
And then Houston took over after that. But the point is, I mean, if you ever go to the museums there, one of the things that stuck out in my mind was they couldn't deal with that number of corpses. So they rounded up all of these criminals from the prisons to go deal with this. And the first thing he did is load them all in ships and haul them out to the Gulf and dump them into the Gulf. And guess what happened to...
Wash back up on the beach.
Yeah, and guess what happened again?
Obviously. They did it again.
The same criminals had to go deal with these rotting bodies.
Worse.
Except
worse the second time.
And anybody who refused got shot.
So the Maori dies because it's so, the stench, the fumes, the poison of the dead bodies down there?
They said that in the beginning it wasn't so bad. They were like a wax museum. They found dead people that were trapped in basements that had been collapsed and etc. But after a few days, and it's springtime, so it's not freezing anymore. So after a few days, they really start to smell and rot. And the Maori dies from being down in those mines trying to pull out bodies that are liquefying.
So they burn them instead.
Flamethrower.
And in that pile of people dying, isn't poor old Edgar Derby in there also?
I thought we were going to get all the way through the book and not find out what happened to Edgar Derby. But when Montana Wildhack mentioned him, I became convinced that we would get the end. But it is just as at least I suspected in the beginning, that he was caught looting, as it were, tried and executed. Last minute. He almost survived the war.
Meanwhile, Billy Pilgrim has a saber with swastikas and crap all over it.
He got that afterwards.
It's when he's on the wheel or on the wagon, right?
These things are swapped in time. It's like the thing that you hate, where it's like 13 days ago, and you jump back. That's what we just did.
Let's see.
The previous chapter had Billy Pilgrim after the war was over, 2 days after the war was over, and they're driving around in that cart. Now, the Germans are getting these prisoners of war and making them go clean up Dresden after it's been bombed. And then by the end of the chapter, we'll end the war. That's how this goes.
So it's because the war is still going on that Derby gets shot.
Yes.
During a wartime situation.
He was looting after the bombing of Dresden. They were pissed. They were like, how dare you, bang. Shortly thereafter, the mines closed down, and all of the soldiers went to defend against the incoming Russians. And then anybody with sense left town, I think. And one day he says that they found that the place where they had been locked in, sleeping in that barn, was no longer locked and the war was over. That's the end of that's the end of the book. Pootie Wheat. Where do we want to go from here? I'm going to tell you guys what I did, and then we can decide what we want to talk about, yeah?
All right.
Because I noticed that the novel was broken up into several different timelines, and that it seemed to me like every chapter we were getting a little bit of the wartime Billy Pilgrim and a little bit of the after the war Billy Pilgrim, and then he was jumping around in time and going to Tralfamadore and etc. So what I did was I went through each chapter and I kind of delineated what was he doing in the war during this chapter, and then what was he doing after the war in this chapter, and this is what I saw. Chapter 1 is just the narrator, so we skip it. Chapter 2, Billy and Roland weary. That's in the war. Chapter 3, he's captured and then marched. Chapter 4, there's the train ride to the prison camp. Chapter 5, they're with the British. They have the Cinderella play, and he has the morphine ride. Chapter 6, they're told chin up, and they depart for Dresden. Chapter 7, they're working in Dresden. That's the factory with the spoons and all that. Chapter 8 is the bombing and the moon-like ruins, and then led off to the inn at the end. Chapter 9, looting. Chapter 10, Billy and the narrator and O'Hare, and the war ends.
Everything is linear when it goes
Yep.
except for that last chapter.
It's told out of order, and you can be forgiven for not catching it. So, but hold on, there's more, right?
Okay.
So now this is the post-war stuff. Chapter 1's the same as above. Chapter 2 is you have after the TV and radio appearances, he's back in Ilium and he's being chastised by his daughter. Chapter 3, life in Ilium, and we just kind of noticed that he felt kind of impotent at this time. Chapter 4, he's kidnapped and taken to Tralfamadore. Chapter 5, he's at the VA hospital with Elliot Rosewater talking about Kilgore trout, and then he's off to the zoo again. Chapter 6, there's the death of Billy Pilgrim. Chapter 7, there's the plane crash. Chapter 8, he's meeting Kilgore trout and goes to his anniversary party. Chapter 9, Valencia's death, Billy on TV and the radio. Chapter 10, so it goes. Did you notice any similarities?
Well, he ain't going linear on his after-war life.
They were kind of in step, though.
I'm sorry. You would have to be an extraordinary reader, which all of us are,
Of course, obviously.
to be able to follow this. And it has been a challenge for me anyway.
Yeah.
I think it was poorly done because it was very, very hard to follow.
I don't think we were supposed to follow it. Think about what the Tralfamadorian novel is supposed to be like. Hard for humans to follow.
Oh.
Impossible, they said, because we can't see in time. But if you think about this novel as a series of memorable moments strung together, hitting you all at the same time, it's a Tralfamadorian novel.
Oh, you got me there. I think as an art form, I think it succeeded in portraying multi-temporal experiences over a three-dimensional experience. Sorry, what I'm trying to get as you are trying to experience four-dimensional time in a three-dimensional book because we as humans can only experience it three-dimensionally.
We experience time.
Time being a variable by which we only can experience linearly. But he's experiencing it not linearly, but constantly.
All right, so let's get into that part of it. Is he just a nutbag that's adapting science fiction novels into his own life?
I think so, yes.
Or is he even Kilgore Trout? Who knows? But
I don't think he's Kilgore
Is
Trout.
there any
Yeah,
evidence
so
in this book that aliens actually exist?
No.
The Montana wild hack thing might have been the thing that maybe proved that there was some alien, the zoo aspect
Yeah,
of
but she
everything.
just disappeared.
And she disappeared, and people suggest that maybe Billy Pilgrim rationalizes when he sees the nudie mag, the porno mag about Montana wild hack, that it's just a nudie mag. Who cares about the reporting in a nudie mag when it comes to how someone's missing? He knows the real truth. It's out there in space. But all the novels and Kilgore Trout stories and things that, are part of the zoo just makes you think.
Chapter 10 had a very clear... it was a very obvious attempt to confuse us by the author, narrator / person, right?
Go on.
On Tralfamadore, says Billy Pilgrim, there isn't much interest in Jesus Christ. The earthling's figure who is most engaging to the Tralfamadorian minds, he says, is Charles Darwin. And it says the same idea appeared in The Big Board by Kilgore Trout. The flying saucer creatures who captured Trout's hero asked him about Darwin. They also asked him about golf. So... to me, that's just one of several examples where we find out that something that Billy Pilgrim is professing as truth has been delivered to him in a Kilgore Trout novel that he's read.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, hold on a second. The problem is that the narrator says, on Tralfamadore, says Billy Pilgrim, and then says the same general idea appears in a book by Kilgore Trout, who's fake that this narrator is writing about.
I'm sorry, I don't have a problem with this. This is not unclear. This is the author suggesting wink, wink, nod, nod. It might not be any of it true.
I got that aspect of it, but you do see that that's a little weird, right?
Yeah, of course it's a little weird.
Okay.
I think Billy Pilgrim is a weirdo. I think that he's a little bit of a nut. I think that it's okay. I think it's justified. I think his behavior is very, very well explained by Vonnegut throughout the novel. And we don't get it in a straight line. We don't get like a paragraph or a couple of pages or a chapter that explains Billy and his problem. We get it like a shotgun scattering throughout the book. You know, little piece here, little piece there. And it's like picking up lore along the way in a game like Dark Souls. You know, it's like you don't get it all at once. You get it over time.
It was funny how you laid out the fact that all the war scenes were basically linear.
Pretty much.
Whereas a lot of his life stuff was either back in time, forward in time, a few minutes ago, you know, that type of stuff. And then that's like an interpretation of fourth dimensional Tralmadorian thinking. If I was to question whether or not this book is a science fiction novel or not, because, you know, it is pretty much just an anti-war book, a PTSD book, I would say because of the writing and the way he's trying to express this story, it most definitely is science fiction. Even if the aliens aren't real.
I think it's fine to call it science fiction. It wouldn't bother me either way, but I can understand why people would put it in regular literature as well, which is generally where it goes.
Well, it's funny how certain people can get put in literature.
Right.
Certain people get lucky like that.
Vonnegut definitely has been pulled out of the genre where he wrote and elevated to literary status.
For what it's worth, I feel enriched by having read this novel.
Well, I'm glad that you do. But I do get the impression that you didn't love it.
Oh, I hated it. It was like almost like a bell-shaped distribution. My antipathy grew with each increasing chapter because it made no sense.
Do you still feel like it doesn't make any sense?
No, my appreciation grew as I reached the end of the book. In my understanding, it was a novel about human behavior and about human failings and human greatness and human horribleness and all these other things. If you dissect every single thing he evaluates for every single person he interacts with, I think he's a master of just capturing human behavior, and it's ugly.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
One of the things I got out of this novel is he's capturing normal human behavior. The old guy farting, right?
Yeah.
Why even put that in the novel? Because guess what? That's normal.
It's a fact of reality that's going to happen to some people.
Yes.
And some other people are going to be little kids with busted thumbs that experience that old man.
Yes, and so throughout this entire novel, I am awash with extraordinary things that happen to normal people or normal things that happen to extraordinary people and vice versa. And at the very end, I think this is a monument to what human beings actually are, which is racist, sexist, militant, volatile, destructive,
flawed. I
only gained this appreciation literally in the 9th and 10th chapter when it all came together.
Exactly, it does. The 9th and 10th chapters all bring it together. It really starts to make sense. You can start to see what he was after, I think.
It was a tough read. It's one of those things that I think you'd have to read multiple times.
I think you definitely benefit from a second reading, but I found it very, very easy to read and pleasurable. I laughed.
But yes, I have been railing against this novel from the beginning, and
I really think you have, but okay.
Really?
You say you have, but you don't really.
I've only been politely not doing it because you mentioned it, because I was trying to, not offend you. But I hated this novel. I hated it from the beginning.
Okay.
The more I read it, the more I hated it. But then I went over the bell curve, and then I started appreciating it.
Yeah, this is a good book.
I think so.
I would say good because it's uncomfortable.
That's good. That's a new experience.
Anyway, think about it this way. We're gonna read a lot of stuff that's gonna have uncomfortable scenes. But if you read all of Malazan, right?
Oh yeah.
It's pretty dark. It never really feels joyous to read those books, ultimately.
Well, there's a difference between that novel and this novel, and with everything Stephen Erickson writes, that's theoretically.
Because you haven't read everything he's written.
Shut up.
Right?
Dude.
Everything is completely fantasy.
There's a lot of make-believe in this story, and there's a lot of real things that happen in this story.
There's one thing that sticks out in my mind.
Yeah.
Do you remember when Kilgore Trout was talking to that woman whose sole purpose was to whatever
Be beautiful. She was this beautiful woman.
he got invited to this party, and he said, "I don't put anything on my novels that isn't true."
But he was lying when he says that.
He was at,
Uh-huh.
yeah, he was at
I
SBEC.
mean, his greatest story, which sounded really good, was being made up on the fly.
But
Right.
but when you actually read this book and the things that are actually true,
Actually.
Actually.
sorry,
True.
definitively,
The problem is, again, and I mean, I would love if he knew that the numbers were wrong. But, that would just be like, that'd be so great.
I mean, everything between his experience with the hobo, the people at the inn, the girls he found boiled alive in the water tank. Can he make all that up? He downplays it, but it's almost too horrific to make up. And if anything, he downplays it.
Well, that's how you get past it.
Put on the blinders and you don't look at the hard stuff.
Yeah, because Billy Pilgrim at the very end, that's that whole pooty tweet thing. He's just looking off at the most beautiful thing in this most horrible situation.
Yeah.
You remember how he was early on described as a poet at the Parthenon with his nostrils flared and his head leaning back and he was leaning against a tree? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Chapter 2 or 3. He was described exactly the same way in chapter 9 when he's having that encounter with the German obstetricians. Exactly the same way. Head leaning back, nostrils flared. And he was having the best time of his life, essentially right then, because it was spring and it was nice out. Everything was beautiful and nothing hurt. And that's the epitaph on his gravestone. Those are good moments for him. But he has to not look at the hard stuff. He has to not see it.
There's people that can't not do that, though.
Yeah.
And they let them... they do. There's all sorts of ways to take care of that.
Ketamine, I hear. Can you put your finger on what you think this novel is for, what its purpose was, besides just having Kurt Vonnegut get through some hard times and write about the war or in his feelings?
I think that is what I was getting at in our last episode. Or maybe it was this episode, I can't remember. But yeah, I think he's ultimately just writing an anti-war book in the guise of a science fiction novel. Mm-hmm. And I do think, though, that the way he tells the story is otherworldly. That's the real art in this book, not just his anti-war stuff. It's the real art is the way it's written.
In direct answer to you right now, to me, it's the stuff that I'm going to remember 5 years from now. The stuff that made me actually tear up. You get that plum pit throat going on. Those moments, that to me is artistry. Because he made me feel something. He did it. He made me feel a particular way. And it was the way he wanted me to feel, almost certainly. He did that to me. He caused a reaction because I read his words on a paper. It's not just the laughter. Some of it was the anger, and some of it was...
What made you the angriest? Was it the last chapters also, or...
Roomford's pretty bad, man. Roomford's pretty bad.
I think that jerk and how he tortured the dog, that probably made me the angriest.
Lazaro.
He's a real piece of work. Plus, he kills Billy.
I don't think there's a single person in this novel that I couldn't identify with. Not one. Even Lazaro.
They all felt pretty real to me as well. And I was particularly enamored with the idea that the Germans weren't being handled as villains. Even though, there was that moment of violence when the guy got his teeth knocked in. And it seemed pretty arbitrary and why do that?
Again,
right?
It's human behavior, or the other Germans, drunk Germans
human.
spitting on the other one.
It is human behavior.
Vonnegut, or maybe the novelist in the book. It felt like an American that didn't love the British that much.
It felt also like an American that might not be that proud to be an American.
That maybe so a little bit too.
I walked away from this novel feeling like it was a general critique of America, capitalism, religion, war, all of these things, because a large number of people in this country profess to be Christian or a Christian nation and, whatever, ruled by morality. And yet we do such horrible things to the rest of the world and to our own people. We saw the the displaced peoples in Ilium, the rioting in Ilium. These are obviously disaffected, unhappy people that, burned their town down. I came away with it feeling like it was a critique of the country itself.
The money tree. There was one more example.
It's so wonderful that you can have this author in your book that writes these admittedly really crappy novels, but it's just like really grand little schemes that go on in them, and it's like these can be Vonnegut's little critique on anything he wants it to be, just through the eyes of Kilgore Trout.
Is that satire?
Sure. I think he's very satirical. Yeah.
Okay.
I've only read some things of his, another novel and some short stories, but they all seem to skate into satire, depending on how you want to play it, for sure.
Sure. I don't know if this book will last the test of time. It's hard to say at this point. Like, people aren't reading Vonnegut as much as they used to. That's a fact. And he's been dead for a little while now, so I don't know what's going to happen with this book and Vonnegut's work in general, but he's still in print. And so on some level, Dell believes in him enough that they're still publishing his books.
So can I give a shout-out that I hope will be in the final cut?
Yeah, sure. Vonnegut's not alive, though, so...
It's not about that. It's about Sharon. Sharon, our friend Sharon, which you have never met, Yule. Absolutely vouched for this novel. Said it was one of her most favorite novels ever. And that vouchment, that mentality was on my mind when I went into chapter 9. It put me over the edge between a novel that sucked, between a novel that was really more complex than I ever appreciated it for. And, I'd like to do a shout-out. Shout-out for Sharon. For
all right, Sharon. Way to go.
Changing
way to
my mind on this novel.
This old man changed his...
What did Sharon do to change your mind on this novel?
Yeah, what'd she say?
It was her overwhelming, enthusiastic, energetic recommendation and excitement for this novel.
And Yule liked it enough to recommend it.
I don't regret it.
It was a loose recommendation.
Actually, I feel incredibly rich. Thank you, Yule, for being this.
Yeah, man.
Hey, you know what? This is thank you for giving Sharon a shout out. You're probably right. I'm going to cut it out, but that's all right.
Boo.
But that brings us to essentially the end of our discussion.
Our destruction of this novel.
Our destruction of this novel. I don't have that much to say other than I think we've done it to death. We've done it as well as we could do it. I enjoyed the book. I do highly recommend it. I think even I think even Philip would recommend it, but probably for different reasons than myself. But I don't want to speak for you, Philip. Would you guys recommend this book to people?
I would recommend this book for people that are serious literature readers, and I would recommend you reading it twice, because once was not...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
If you wanted to fully appreciate this book, you had to you absolutely have to read it more than once. This is literature. This is not entertainment.
This was literature, not entertainment. I like that. Well, I do not agree with Phil when it comes to that, because literature is entertainment, and there's a difference between a movie and a film.
You've been talking to Rick Worley.
Often sci-fi and fantasy doesn't really broach into literature, and there are a few exceptions. And if we can accept that this is a science fiction novel, then we can also accept that this is a sci-fi novel that's literature. And we need as many of those as we can get. Mm-hmm. That's why I like Steven Erikson so much, and you guys woke me up to Glenn Cook. He's a really good writer.
Yep.
And we've also, on this channel, have done the Wizard of the Earthsea, and you are a big Le Guin fan now, right?
Oh, huge. Yeah, she's a master, undeniable.
Right. So these are, something you can get a little... Look, we all like a really awesome story.
Yeah.
But when you get an emotional and visceral reaction, it's more than just like, oh, that was cool. Remember when this happened. But you can, I don't know, write a paper on it. Sure. That just makes it all the better, because you can further examine something and get a deeper enrichment from the source material, and I don't know, that's the best. It's when I can have my sci-fi and fantasy be literature. Holy cow! What a deal.
There's not a lot of that going on in the world. Can you think of a couple?
Well, Oh, wait, you mean sci-fi and fantasy right now?
Sci-fi or fantasy novels that you think crest into literature.
I personally think that Steven Erikson in his Malazan books
Yeah.
do. If
Okay.
only because of the way he structures a sentence.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
Yeah,
He's pretty good.
He's right up there with some of my favorite, wordsmiths.
Huh, okay.
The only person in science fiction that I've read in the past that really moved me was Mary Doria Russell, who did The Sparrow.
And Children of God?
Yeah, I never read the sequel. I kind of find sometimes you don't really want to read the sequel. But
That's
that
a
was
good book,
such
though.
an amazing book, and it brought religion into science fiction, and it just wow, what a powerful book. I have to read that one again someday.
Yep, it was a good book. So, now that you've mentioned Steven Erikson a few times, I think it's an appropriate time to discuss the fact that we have not selected our next book.
Dun dun dun.
I have in my hand 4 novels
Yes.
that I have wanted to read for some time.
I choose hand 4.
Hand 4. I actually just put them down, so you get it. You got
No,
it.
wait,
You got
should
it.
we roll the dice? Because I'm a D&D guy.
This is not going to be done by random selection. This is going to be done because we all agree that we want to read the next book.
All right,
Okay.
very good.
First choice, Willful Child by Steven Erikson.
Whoa, I've got that in my house here.
This is Steven Erikson's science fiction influenced by the fact that he loves Star Trek.
Oh, that's tempting.
Okay.
That is tempting. I heard it was kind of all ages, though.
I don't care. I don't
Okay.
care.
I'm
I
just
want to
saying.
read it.
Yeah, very good.
Next book, Ian C. Esselmont's Knight of Knives. The first novel by Ian C. Esselmont in the Malazan world.
Oh, that's so tempting also.
I mean, I have never read his books, but I have almost all of them here.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Oh,
Third, they're going to get less exciting now as we go on, okay? Because this book is particularly old. This is a science fiction novel by Philip K. Dick called The 3 Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch,
Okay.
which is supposed to be terrifying and a masterpiece.
Less exciting because we're doing a lot of old stuff.
Because you know nothing about it, and that's why.
That's true. And we've been doing lots of old stuff which nobody cares about.
This is not that kind of old. This is not Isaac Asimov old.
yeah, Mr.
Yeah, Philip.
Asimov over there.
Final option, Book 1 of Mervyn Peake's masterwork, Titus Groan.
I know nothing about that.
Most people don't. This is a fantasy trilogy that came out in the 60s or the 50s, somewhere in that range.
Well,
And it is highly recommended by people who like literature.
Mervis Groan and Titus Peak. Okay, got it.
Titus Groan is the name of the book.
I'm just messing with you guys.
Ooh, I want to read that, but I fear for Philip right now.
You know, if we choose that one, Philip's not invited. How's that?
Okay, very good.
What?
We'll bring Jill on this one.
Yeah, I feel like Philip would not enjoy it, and he would find an excuse to be too busy to show up.
I will never make the excuse to be too busy because that's not my vocabulary.
So those are the choices.
I'm gonna just roll a dice right now.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not kidding.
Dude.
Every single thing you've mentioned is worthy of inclusion.
Yeah, I know that.
God, I don't
But
know.
I
man.
honestly,
Tell me why you want to read one or don't want to read one.
I don't think it's
and then
I
decide.
don't think it's fair.
Fine, roll a die. Let's have your decision right
All
now.
right, right now I'm gonna roll die. Give me a
Yeah,
second.
go on.
I'm not going to give you yet.
We got to find out whether or not I need to discount your vote.
Number 3.
Number 3
The
was
Three
the
Stigmata.
3 Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch.
Down.
I'm down 100% down with that one. I am
All right, I'm totally down.
I am all
That's
for
it.
that one.
We've chosen it, everybody. We're doing Philip K. Dick now, the 3 Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch.
All right. I know very little about this book, but I have heard much good stuff. All right, so that's decided. Probably shouldn't decide it this way by rolling the die, but that's how it happened, people. That's how it happened.
Sorry, Titus Groan.
No, we'll get there. We'll get there.
We'll get there someday.
These are all books on my short list.
Well, how
so.
eclectic our choices have been.
Well,
We didn't do Harry Potter like I wanted, but what are you gonna do?
Well, we didn't do Cherry Potter like I wanted to.
all right. Well, thank you guys for joining me and discussing Slaughterhouse 5. I had a really good time with this book. Well, I always have a good time when I get together and talk with you guys. Sometimes it's a little bit of a minor hell, but it's also usually pretty fun. So, and thank all of our listeners also for joining us. We're going to be doing, Three Stigmata. Woo! I'm getting chills. All right. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you in the next one, guys.
All right, bye.
Bye.